In this video, I'm going to model for you and discuss how to respond to literature in your academic voice. And for the purposes of 102, you kind of want to commit this formula to memory because it will help you write strong responses to the prompts that you're going to receive in your, not just your discussion board posts, but also for your essay prompts. But it will help you in the long run as just a very useful pattern for responding to literature in an academic voice. So this type of response, this pattern is called a CTE response, and that's basically a claim, textual evidence, and then an explanation. And so I kind of wanted to go through that today, and then I also want to show you what that looks like with a sample text and a sample response. So a claim is what you intend to prove in your written response. This is your thesis. It should be one well-developed sentence. When you're just getting started writing a thesis, sometimes it really helps to take the writing task prompt that you're given and use it to develop your focus. I'm going to show you how to do that here very shortly. So the second part of a CTE response is the textual evidence. It's not just enough to say, this is what I'm going to prove. You have to have the meat to prove your claim. So what specific material is it from the text that provides support for your claim? You can do that in one of two ways. You can paraphrase, which is where you kind of take what is in the text and you kind of put it into your own words, or you use quoted text. It helps to have a balance of those things in your writing so that you don't have a heavy list of quotations that just, you want to try to balance that as much as possible, but you always want to choose the best quotes to provide evidence to your claim. And we'll talk about how to select good, strong quotes for that purpose. The last part of a CTE response is the explanation. And how does your evidence support your claim? So you've given me what you intend to prove. You've given me the material that you think proves that. And now you have to explain to your reader, to your audience, how that evidence that you chose connects to your thesis. This should always be at least 2 good sentences of commentary. Most often it'll be much more extensive depending on the length of what you need to explain. So we're going to start by looking at a short text by Alice Walker called The Flowers, and we're going to read it together, and then I'm going to kind of annotate it as we go along. I want you to think about the literary elements that you see. It's not the story itself that you really want to focus or hone in on. You want to look at the choices that the writer makes, those moves that we talked about last semester. What are the moves that the writer is making to tell the story? It goes beyond the meaning. What are the choices that he or she, in this case, Alice Walker, what choices are they making to push put their story forward or develop their story? So you want to kind of pay attention to literary elements like the author's tone, the setting, the character, the identity of the character, the symbolism of things within the story, because all of those are purposeful moves that the writer helps to provide meaning for the story. Okay, so we're going to just kind of start at the top, and we'll kind of talk about things as we go along. So it seemed to Mop, as she skipped lightly from henhouse to pig pen to smokehouse, that the days had never been as beautiful as these. The air held a keenness that made her nose twitch. The harvesting of the corn and cotton, peanuts and squash, made each day a golden surprise that it caused excited little tremors to run up her jaws. Mop carried a short, knobby stick. She struck out at at chickens she liked, and worked out the beat of a song on the fence around the pig pen. She felt light and good in the warm sun. She was 10, and nothing existed for her but her song, the stick clutched in her dark brown hand, and the tap-diddy-ta-ta-ta, the accompaniment. Before I even found out that Mop was 10, I was almost 100% positive that she was a young girl because the author chose purposefully these playful, childlike verbs here in the story to show me that. So she's skipping lightly from hen house to pig pen. She is striking out with this stick, striking out at random at these chickens. She's working out the beat of a song, drumming on the fence as she goes along. Okay, and here it says that she felt light and good in the warm sun. She's a kid. She's enjoying the day. It even goes on to tell us that nothing is existing for her but the song, the stick, the drumming. She's not thinking, she's not having any heavy, deep life revelations going on in her head. Turning her back on the rusty boards of her family's sharecropper cabin, Ma walked along the fence till it ran into the stream made by the spring. Around the spring, where the family got drinking water, silver ferns and wildflowers grew. Along the shallow banks, pigs rooted. Ma watched the tiny white bubbles disrupt the thin black scale of soil and the water that silently rose and slid away down the stream. She had explored the woods behind the house many times. Often, in late autumn, her mother took her to gather nuts among the fallen leaves. Today, she's made her own path. Here she is. She's wandering away from the familiar, and we kind of start to see maybe a little foreshadowing of where the story is headed. She's wandering away from the familiar. But she's bouncing this way and that, still childlike, still having a good time. Those childlike and playfulness in the diction that she's choosing there. Vaguely keeping an eye out for snakes. She found, in addition to various common but pretty ferns and leaves, an armful of strange blue flowers with velvety ridges and a sweet suds bush full of the brown fragrant buds. By 12 o'clock, her arms laden with sprigs of her findings, she was a mile or more from home. She had often been as far before, but the strangeness of the land made it not as pleasant as her usual haunts. Hold up. We've got some kind of shift happening here. This land is different. It's strange. It's not as pleasant as usual, her usual haunts. It's gloomy. Oh, I didn't pick that up. I'm sorry. Not as pleasant. It's gloomy. The air is damp. And its silence is close and deep. Everything about this area is different than where she was before, because she's in an area that she's never been to before. Mop began to circle back to the house, back to the peacefulness in the morning. I realize I've gone too far. I need to get back home. Kind of jogged out of my comfort zone. It was then that she stepped smack into his eyes. Her heel became lodged in the broken ridge between brow and nose, and she reached down quickly, unafraid, to free herself. It was only when she saw his naked grin that she gave a little yelp of surprise. At first, she doesn't even realize exactly what it is that she's done. And then in your mind, you're thinking, oh, it's an animal of some sort. However, we quickly see here as it progresses down that it's not an animal skeleton. It is a human skeleton. He had been a tall man, from feet to neck, covered a long space. His head lay beside him. When she pushed back the leaves and layers of earth and debris, Mop saw that he'd had large white teeth, all of them cracked or broken, long fingers, and very big bones. All his clothes had rotted away, except some threads of blue denim from his overalls. The buckles of the overall had turned green. He's been there a while. His clothes have rotted away. The metal that is left behind is oxidizing, and he's clearly been there a while. Mop gazed around the spot with interest. Very near where she'd stepped into the head was a wild pink rose. As she picked it to add to her bundle, she noticed a raised mound, a ring around the rose's root. Before we continue any further, I want to point out that she's only now just surprised, right? She gives a little yelp. It's only when she saw his grin that she gives a little yelp of surprise. She goes on, it's only when she gets here, she picks this flower. So she's clearly not as disturbed to find, of the bones of this person. It is only here when something catches her eye, okay? So I just wanted to really point that out. She's still not too terrified to pick a pink rose that is close to his skull. As she picked it to add to her bundle, she noticed a raised mound, a ring, around the rose's root. It was the rotted remains of a noose, a bit of shredding plow line, now blending benignly into the soil. Around an overhanging limb of a great spreading oak clung another piece, frayed, rotted, bleached, and frazzled, barely there, but spinning restlessly in the breeze. Mop laid down her flowers, and the summer was over. So I think these last two lines kind of say everything that we need to say. Here in the beginning, she's light, she's good, she feels good in the warm sun, and we see through her, after her discovery, she is no longer light and good in the warm sun. She lays down those flowers, and her summer is over. And summer on the grander scale is, I've seen something here, the hanging, a corpse that has essentially been hung out here in the woods. It's not just a death, it's a horrific death, and her innocence is now over. So let's flip back over here to my CTE, and I've been given the prompt, how could Alice Walker's The Flowers be considered a coming of age or loss of innocence story? And so my claim, I'm going to take my writing prompt, and I'm going to kind of take two of the literary elements that we kind of talked about, her choice of language and her choice of imagery, and I want to fold those elements to create help construct my claim. So my claim is that Walker's use of vivid imagery and the purposeful shift in diction help illustrate my loss of innocence in The Flowers. I'm going to talk about those images, those playful images in the beginning that are quickly replaced, those images of lightness that are quickly replaced with images of darkness as she finds herself in a dark place in the woods where she discovers the body, and the shift in that diction as well to help illustrate her loss of innocence. So my textual evidence, I'm paraphrasing and using quotes. I'm using a balance. Mop skips lightly, bouncing this way and that, down a familiar path, collecting a bouquet of wildflowers. She journeys a bit further than usual and finds herself in a gloomy, strange land, not as pleasant as her usual haunts, with a silence that was close and deep. In this land, she literally steps smack into the eyes and sees the naked grin of the decaying corpse of a man who had been hung in the woods. No longer feeling light and good in the warm sun, she lays down her bouquet, and the summer was over. Now, it's not enough for me to just use the text here. I've got to explain how that connects to my thesis. So how does my textual evidence here help provide support for my claim? So I wrote that her childlike innocence is established in the initial paragraphs through Walker's choice of playful verbs. As the story continues, the imagery begins to shift from lightness to darkness, which illustrates that Mop has crossed over into the unknown. The culmination of her journey is the horrifying discovery of the body, a sight that Mop has never encountered and is likely never to forget. At this, she lays down her childhood notions, and her innocence is gone. So I have answered this prompt through a CTE response. I've made a claim, I've provided the textual evidence, and I've written an explanation that connects my textual evidence back to my claim.